My name's Theo, I'm 34, and I guess if you'd asked anyone in my extended family who the responsible one was, they'd have pointed to me. I had a solid job in IT, no major drama, and more or less kept my head down. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't the loudest at reunions, but I was the guy you could call when your car broke down or when you needed to borrow rent money for the third month in a row. I didn't mind. Not at first. I figured, hey, I've been lucky. If I can help someone get through a rough patch, then great. And when it came to family, my aunt, my cousins, even my older brother, there was always someone going through a rough patch. I was raised by my grandparents after my mom passed when I was 12. Dad was out of the picture before I was born. My cousins were mostly raised by my aunt, who never really got on her feet. So I felt like I owed them something. Maybe not financially, but emotionally. You know? Like, I made it out. So let me make sure no one else drowns. It started small. My cousin Trina needed help covering her last semester of community college. Her Pell Grant fell through, and she was short $1,200. I sent it without blinking. A few months later, my aunt's rent was overdue, and she was days away from eviction. I paid the landlord directly, told her not to worry. Then came my brother, Nate, who was trying to launch a mobile auto detailing business and needed startup money. I gave him $3,000. Spoiler alert, the business never launched, but the money sure disappeared. And so it went. Month after month, year after year, little requests that added up to tens of thousands. At some point, I stopped thinking of them as loans and just accepted that I'd never see any of it again. But still, I never said no. I told myself that they appreciated it, that it meant something to them. Then came the group call. It was a Sunday evening, just a casual family catch-up over Zoom. We hadn't done one in a while, and since Trina had moved to another city, we were all trying to stay connected. The call was already running late, and I was quiet for most of it, just sipping my tea and listening to my aunt talk about her neighbor's dog getting into her backyard again. Trina was on her phone most of the time, occasionally glancing up to nod. At some point, I guess she thought she'd muted herself. Her camera was off, and she was clearly talking to someone else in the room. I don't think she knew we could all hear her until it was too late. You know what's wild? She said, laughing. Theo's like this. Wallet with feelings. You just ask nice enough, maybe cry a little, and boom, rent's paid. Again, I don't even feel bad anymore. There was this pause, a weird silence. And then, from someone else, my aunt, I think, I heard, well, at least he's good for something. Let him play the hero. He likes it. Someone else snorted. My brother, maybe. Better than dealing with his sad little life. Has he ever even had a girlfriend? I didn't speak. I didn't even move. I just sat there, staring at my screen, as their words blurred into one long fog of cheap shots and casual cruelty. Nobody noticed I was still on the call. Nobody cared. They thought I was gone. Or maybe they just forgot I was a person, not a transaction. I closed the laptop without a word. Didn't message. Didn't call. I sat there in the dark for a long time, just letting it all settle. It wasn't anger I felt. Not yet. It was something heavier. Like grief, almost. Like I'd lost something I didn't even realize I was clinging to. Some belief that, deep down, I mattered to them as more than a means to an end. That I was family, not just funding. The next morning, I went through my bank statements. I counted everything I'd sent to them over the last 5 years. Rent, tuition, groceries, emergency car repairs, random Venmo requests labeled "Please Urgent." It came out to $48,720. And that didn't even include birthday gifts, or the time I covered the deposit when Nate got evicted and needed a new apartment ASAP. I kept staring at the number. 48 grand. That was a down payment. That was a new car. That was almost half of what I'd been saving for my own future, chipped away one excuse at a time. And here they were, laughing about it like I was some joke with a credit card. I didn't rage. I didn't explode. Instead, I got very, very quiet. And then I made a list. I listed out every recurring payment I was covering. My aunt's rent, $1, $0.50 per month. Trina's phone bill, $82. Nate's car insurance, $117. All of it was in my name. Because years ago, they convinced me it was easier that way. They'd Venmo me when they could, which, shockingly, almost never happened. So I logged into each account, canceled every auto payment, and changed every password. I wrote down exactly when each one would bounce. I marked the dates on my calendar like little holidays. Then I waited. The first message came from my aunt on the 5th of the month. Theo, something's wrong with the rent portal. It says the payment failed? Can you check? No greeting. No question mark at the end of can you check? Just a passive-aggressive accusation wrapped in confusion. I didn't respond. 3 days later. Hey, I'm getting emails about late fees. Is this a glitch? Nothing. Then Trina chimed in. Did the phone company mess up the autopay? My service is suspended. I can't even call anyone. Still silent. Nate's message was my favorite. Bro, my insurance lapsed? I had a claim last week and now they're saying I'm uninsured. No reply. What I didn't do was block them. That would have been too easy. Too clean. I wanted them to sit with it. To feel the absence, to wonder. I wanted them to remember every flippant word from that call. Every moment they treated me like some glorified ATM with no boundaries and no self-respect. A week passed. Then two. My aunt sent a long text that started with, "We need to talk," and quickly devolved into, "I don't understand why you're being like this," followed by, "We're family," and my personal favorite, "Don't let some joke on a call ruin years of love." I finally responded, "Wallet with feelings." Your words. Not mine. That was it. One sentence. I knew they'd understand. I knew it would sting. But that wasn't the end. Because what none of them knew, what they couldn't possibly have seen coming, was what I did next. And when it hit them, when the full weight of it landed in their laps like a thunderclap, there would be no walking it back. After I sent that text, just those 4 words, I didn't get an immediate response. For the first time in years, my phone was blissfully quiet. No late-night Venmo requests, no guilt-tripping emojis, no thinly veiled jabs wrapped in fake concern. Just silence. For a few days, it almost felt like peace. Almost. But I knew my family well enough to know that silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. And sure enough, a few days later, I got a message from my cousin Lisa. She never asked me for money directly, which made her their designated peacemaker. Her message was long, rambling, full of phrases like misunderstanding, "You know they didn't mean it like that," and "They're just stressed. Theo, you've always been the rock." She even dropped in a picture of her newborn, like that was somehow supposed to make me feel soft again. And for a moment, I did hesitate, because I did love them. Or at least, the version of them I thought I knew. But then I remembered the way Trina laughed. That sharp, dismissive sound. Wallet with feelings. And the way my aunt agreed. At least he's good for something. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was truth slipping out when they thought no one was listening. So no, I didn't bend. I didn't even reply. That's when the guilt campaign began. It started with vague Facebook posts. My aunt shared one that said, "Some people forget who was there for them when they had nothing." Trina posted a selfie with the caption, "You give, and some people still turn on you." Nate, ever the subtle genius, wrote, "Crazy how family will ghost you over nothing." SMH. The likes and supportive comments rolled in. Friends who had no idea what was really going on left little crying emojis and stay strong messages. But I didn't bite. I didn't comment. I didn't explain myself. Because I didn't need to. They were unraveling all on their own. What they didn't realize is that cutting off the payments was just the first domino. You see, over the years, I hadn't just paid their bills. I'd set them up. I'd co-sign leases. Put utilities in my name. Registered phone lines under my credit. I did it because they needed help, and I thought I was doing the right thing. But that also meant I had access to everything. And now I had the time and the motivation to clean house. First, I called the property manager for my aunt's apartment and asked for a copy of the lease agreement. Turns out she hadn't renewed it in 2 years. She was still technically month to month, under my name. I sent a formal request to terminate at the end of the month. The manager said, "Wait, you don't want to renew for your aunt?" And I said, "She's not my tenant. I'm not her wallet anymore." Then I called the phone carrier and asked to close the family plan I had been paying for. There were 5 lines on it, Trina's, her boyfriend's, my aunt's, and 2 mystery numbers I didn't even recognize. When I shut it down, they all lost service at once. I got a barrage of angry texts from random numbers afterward, but I didn't reply. Not my problem anymore. Then came the car insurance. Nate had been driving under my plan. I had set it up in college when he had no credit. He kept saying he'd get his own, but never did. When I canceled the policy, I made sure it was retroactive. He drove uninsured for 6 days before he found out. I imagined that conversation at the DMV was fun. But the final card, the real ace up my sleeve, was a little trust fund my grandparents had left when they passed. It wasn't much, but they'd asked me to manage it for the family. Just a few $1,000s, held in a shared account, with me as the executor. I'd let it sit there, untouched, for years. But after that call, I decided it was time to disperse it. Not to them, to their kids. I went to a lawyer, explained the situation, and had everything documented. I wrote checks directly to educational accounts for the three youngest cousins. I included a note with each one. This is from your great-grandparents. I hope you grow up with more empathy than your parents. The moment those checks cleared, the rest of the family found out, and that's when things really exploded. I woke up one morning to over 30 missed calls. My aunt left a voicemail that started out weepy and ended in rage. How dare you go behind our backs and steal from us? That money wasn't yours to decide on. Trina left a comment on one of my Instagram posts, just the clown emoji. Nate texted me, you better lawyer up, bro. This isn't over. But the best one, the absolute cherry on top, was a message from my uncle, who hadn't spoken to me in nearly a decade. He wrote, just heard about the drama. Honestly, about time someone did it. You've been too generous for too long. Don't let them drag you back down. That one stayed with me, because it reminded me that not everyone in the family was toxic. Some were just silent, watching, waiting to see how it played out. A week later, I got a group invite, another Zoom call. Trina sent it. No message. Just a link and a title. Let's clear the air. I hovered over the link for a good minute. I even clicked it. Let it load. And for a few seconds, I saw their faces awkward, tense, pretending to be cheerful. My aunt smiled. Trina looked like she was about to speak. But I didn't unmute. I didn't wave. I just smiled and closed the window. Because they weren't the only ones who could disappear without a word. The next few weeks were quieter than they'd ever been. No texts. No calls. No more late-night emergencies. The silence wasn't just peaceful, it was clarifying. For the first time in what felt like years, I had time to focus on myself. I went through old journals I hadn't touched since college, started cooking again, even joined a weekend hiking group. Things I had shelved under the vague excuse of being too busy. The truth was, I had made myself busy for them. And now that they were gone, I realized just how much space they'd taken up, not just in my schedule, but in my mind. But of course, toxic people don't vanish. They just wait for a new angle. It came through an unexpected source. My mom's sister, Aunt Carla. She was the only one from my mom's side of the family I kept in touch with. She called me one Sunday morning and said, "Sweetheart, I think you should know. Trina's been telling people you emptied a fund meant for the whole family. That you're holding everyone's money hostage." I sighed, rubbing my temples. That's rich. I have the receipts, Carla. Legal ones. I know, honey. I believe you. But you might want to check Facebook. I hadn't checked in a while. I logged in and found my notifications swamped. Trina had posted a long, performative message, complete with a throwback photo of her and me as kids, captioned, "It hurts when the person you thought was your brother turns out to be your accountant." And a crooked one at that. Hundreds of comments. Half of them from people I didn't even know, clutching pearls and offering digital hugs. The rest from mutual friends and distant family, saying things like, "There are always two sides," and "I never liked the way he acted like he was better than everyone." I didn't respond. I just screenshotted everything. Not because I planned to sue her for defamation, though I probably could have, but because I wanted a record. A reminder. Proof of just how far they were willing to go once the money stopped flowing. But what really got me was what happened next. One of the younger cousins, Mia, she was maybe 17, sent me a DM. Just 3 words. Are they lying? I stared at the message for a long time. I could have ignored it. Could have said, "Ask your mom." But instead, I called her. And we talked for 2 hours. She told me she felt caught in the middle. That her mom, Trina, kept saying I stole from the family, but it didn't sit right with her. She'd seen how hard I worked, how often I helped. And she remembered me slipping her $50 once so she could buy books for school when her mom said there wasn't money. I told her the truth. All of it. And at the end, she said, "I don't want to end up like them." That hit me harder than any insult they'd thrown. Because here was a kid, still figuring it out, and she could already see the difference. That meant something. I offered to help her apply for scholarships, recommended a few internships. She said she wanted to get out, go to college, get a job, and stop being a branch on the beggar tree, as she put it. We laughed. But behind it, there was something real. A spark. And for the first time since all of this started, I felt proud. Like maybe I had made a difference. Then, almost exactly 2 months after the infamous group call, I got a knock on my door. It was my brother, Nate. He looked rough. Sunken eyes, patchy beard, hoodie pulled low over his face. The last time I'd seen him in person was over a year ago, when I'd driven across the city at midnight because he said he had a flat tire emergency that turned out to be a bad date he wanted to escape. I didn't invite him in. I stood in the doorway. He didn't waste time. I messed up, man. I said nothing. I got a letter. From collections. For the insurance. Still, I didn't speak. And Trina's got people talking about suing you. I told her it's a bad idea. But you know how she is. He looked down at his shoes. Shifted his weight. I'm not here to guilt you. I guess I wanted to say I'm sorry. I raised an eyebrow. For what? He hesitated. For all of it. For treating you like a bank. For laughing when I thought you couldn't hear. For making you think that's all you were to us. You mean all I was to you, I said flatly. Let's not drag the whole family into your apology if you don't mean it. He nodded, sheepish. Fair. There was a long pause. A breeze picked up behind him, rustling the leaves. A car passed by in the distance. Finally, he said, So, can we reset? And I looked him dead in the eye and said, I don't know, Nate. Resetting means we go back to zero. But you took me below zero. He swallowed hard, nodded slowly, and turned to leave. I didn't stop him. Because here's the thing, redemption isn't just a word you say. It's a debt you repay. And after everything, I'm not interested in giving out more credit. That night, I got a call from Aunt Carla again. She'd heard from some extended family that Trina was starting to feel the heat, people asking questions, wondering why the person who'd paid their bills for years was suddenly the villain. A few relatives even reached out to me privately, saying they were sorry, that they didn't know the full story. I didn't reply to all of them. Just one. My grandmother's sister, Sylvia. She was in her 80s. Old school. She left a voicemail that said, You were always kind. Theo? Too kind, maybe. But you finally set a boundary. And that's not cruel, it's necessary. I'm proud of you, dear. I saved that voicemail. Because for once, someone saw me. Not as a wallet. Not as a fixer. But as a person. A person with feelings. And this time, I was finally using them, for me. 3 months passed. Long enough for the noise to fade. Long enough for the silence to settle in, not as an awkward absence, but as peace. By then, the dust had cleared. The lies fell apart under scrutiny. People stopped engaging with Trina's pity posts. My aunt took down her dramatic status updates. Nate disappeared from social media altogether. Without my financial support, the illusion of control they'd maintained started crumbling. They couldn't guilt me. Couldn't shame me. Couldn't manipulate me anymore. I wasn't just out of their pockets, I was out of their reach. One morning in mid-January, I got a certified letter in the mail. It was from Trina's boyfriend. Or rather, her ex. I recognized the name from the phone plan I had shut off. It was a half-hearted attempt to demand repayment for the money I had stolen from the family trust. I didn't even need a lawyer to know it was toothless. I took a picture of it, texted it to my actual lawyer, and he just replied, This is nonsense. If they keep this up, we'll go after them for harassment. That was the final whimper. I never heard from them again. Not a call, not a message, not a knock at my door. They had burned the bridge, then tried to swim across the flames when the heat got too real. And I let it burn. A month later, I was at a small family gathering hosted by Aunt Carla. It was quiet, low-key, just a dozen or so relatives from my mom's side. No drama, no guilt trips, no entitled rants. At one point during dinner, her husband raised a glass and said, To Theo, for showing us how to give and when to stop. Everyone clinked glasses. And I just smiled. That night, I walked home under a sky full of stars. Cold wind in my lungs, steady steps beneath me. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to be everything to everyone, how I let myself become a resource instead of a relative. A provider, not a person. But not anymore. Now, I had boundaries. Not walls, not barbed wire, just clear lines that said, This is who I am. And this is how I deserve to be treated. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need them to grovel or beg or say they were wrong. I had something better. I had my life back. And that was worth far more than anything I'd ever given them.